Hello, good evening, and welcome to tonight's reading of our story from the collected short stories of Ruskin Bond. And tonight's story is titled All Creatures Great and Small. It goes like this, starts. Instead of having brothers and sisters to grow up in India, there's a with there. Instead of having brothers and sisters to grow up with in India, I had as my companions an odd assortment of pets, which included a monkey, a tortoise, a python, and a great Indian hornbill. The person responsible for all this wildlife in the home was my grandfather, and the house was his own. As the house was his own, other members of the family could not prevent him from keeping a large variety of pets. Although they could certainly voice their objections, and as most of the household consisted of women, my grandmother, visiting aunts, and occasional in-laws. By the way, my parents were in Burma at the time. Grandfather and I had to be alert and resourceful in dealing with them. We saw eye to eye on the subject of pets, and whenever grandmother decided it was time to get rid of a tame white rat or a squirrel, I would conceal them in a hole in the jackfruit tree. But unlike my aunts, she was generally tolerant of grandfather's hobby and even took a liking to some of her pets. Grandfather's house and menagerie. Menagerie means the collection of the so many animals living in a place is called a menagerie. Grandfather's house and menagerie were in Dera, and I remember traveling there in a horse-drawn buggy. There were cars in those days. It was just over 20 years ago. That is when he wrote this. As of today, 2025, this must have been about 150 years ago. So there were cars in those days. It was just over 20 years ago. But in the foothills, a Tonga was just as good, almost as fast, and certainly more dependable when it came to getting across the swift little Tons River. During the rains, when the river flowed strong and deep, it was impossible to get across except on a hand-operated ropeway. But in the dry months, the horse went splashing through, the carriage wheels churning through clear mountain water. If the horse found the going difficult, we removed our shoes, rolled up our skirts or trousers, and waded across. So simple and elegant. Lovely. When grandfather first went to stay in Dera, early in the century, the only way of getting there was by the night mail coach. This must have been 1800 maybe, early in the century. And the only way of getting there was by night mail coach, a train which goes in the night, and there would be one coach in it which would be taken to Dera from whatever was the nearest major junction. Male ponies, he told me, were difficult animals, always attempting to turn around and get into the coach with the passengers. My God. Male ponies, he told me, were difficult animals, always attempting to turn around and get into the coach with the passengers. It was only when the coachman used his whip liberally and reviled the ponies' ancestors as far back as the third and fourth generations, that the beasts could be persuaded to move. And once they started, there was no stopping them. It was a gallop all the way to the first stage, where the ponies were changed to the accompaniment of a bugle blown by the coachman. So this gives you a picture of what used to happen then. There would be a male pony. The ponies would collect the mail from the train, and then the coach, the mail coach would collect the mail brought by the train, and then the ponies will, the coach will go around delivering the mail to the houses. At one stage of the journey, drums were beaten, and if it was night, torches were lit to keep the wild elephants who resenting the approach of the clumsy caravan would sometimes trumpet a challenge and throw the ponies into confusion. So that's another thing. In those days, the elephants felt threatened and resentful of the intrusion, and they would blow trumpets loudly, they would create noise, and the ponies would get scared and run. Grandfather disliked dressing up and going out, and was only too glad to send everyone shopping or to the pictures. Harold Lloyd and Eddie Cantor were the favorites at Dara's small cinema. You can look up Harold Lloyd. He was, I think, a comedian, and Eddie Cantor must be. So we can look up what age it would be, what year, were the favorites at Dara's small cinema, so that he could be left alone to feed his pets and potter about in the garden. There were a lot of animals to be fed, including, for a time, a pair of Great Danes who had such enormous appetites that we were forced to give them away to a more affluent family, the Great Danes. The Great Danes were gentle creatures, and I would sit astride one of them and go for rides around the garden. In spite of their size, they were very sure-footed and never knocked over people or chairs. A little monkey, like Toto, did much more damage. Grandfather bought Toto from a Tonga owner for the sum of 5 rupees. The Tonga man used to keep the little red monkey tied to a feeding trough, and Toto looked so out of place there, almost conscious of his own incongruity, that grandfather immediately decided to add him to our menagerie. Toto was really a pretty little monkey. His bright eyes sparkled with mischief beneath deep-set eyebrows, and his teeth, a pearly white, were often out on display in a smile that frightened the life out of elderly Anglo-Indian ladies. His hands were not those of a Tallulah Bankhead, grandfather's only favorite actress. His hands were not those of a Tallulah Bankhead, grandfather's only favorite actress, but were shriveled and dried up. What was that again? Oh, the monkeys. Hands were not those of a Tallulah blanket, but were shriveled and dried up, as though they had been pickled in the sun for many years. But his fingers were quick, sorry, we'll wait. Manakkarve.
What are you doing?
And then, so I stopped.
It's above.
Yeah.
But it's plugging it.